folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. Today we have an unboxing that is long awaited over here at Ardwulf's Lair, and it is large, thus the somewhat wider shot than you typically get in these videos. So this 11-pound package has just arrived from Decision Games in Bakersfield, California. This is going to be the Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition. So let's open her up and see what we get. This has been a little bit of a saga getting this out. It was supposed to have been targeted for release a few years ago, and there were some delays. Somehow, I do not have any details on what those delays may have been, only speculation. So, pretty good packing job. The box itself is protected by the starch peanuts that a lot of companies are using now. You know, when I worked in a industrial warehouse back in the 90s, we actually used the cornstarch peanuts too. So they're not new to me. They might be new to a lot of folks. And if you haven't seen them before, they do kind of disintegrate in water. So, and we got some shrink wrap, or bubble wrap, I should say. Obviously, there's shrink wrap as well. So this box is quite heavy. And as I think we're going to see, now I had played the previous edition, and I actually have some video on the previous edition, Axis Empire's Total Krieg and Axis Empire's Die Senso, which were available in separate games. This combines those two separate games into one big package. And just from seeing the pictures, there has been a significant graphical upgrade in terms of graphical design quality here versus the old games, which there was nothing wrong with, but they've really stepped it up over Decision as far as graphic design is concerned, both in terms of the components and rulebook layouts and really kind of every aspect. And the counters pretty much look the same from the pictures that I've seen as they looked in the previous edition, but I'm sure they are additionally redone. But there's not a ton going on the counters, so they didn't need the upgrade. Great box cover. I've had plenty to say about lackluster box covers from Decision in the past. That appears to be a thing of the past, and I think this thing looks great. So this is so big that I am standing it up. This is the big flat Decision box that we've seen in a number of things, including some revisitations of SPI classics like Empires of the Middle Ages or Highway to the Reich. But this one's a 3-inch box. I think the only games they may have done in this size box were Atlantic Wall and War in the Pacific. I think it's 3 inches anyway. So this is the same size box as Atlantic Wall comes in, except it's the thicker box. So box back, very briefly, we're not going to read this entire text. This is a strategic level World War II game covering both Europe and the Pacific. Contains 5 books, 2,380 counters, 4 maps, which are pretty standard size maps as I recall, over 500 cards in 7 decks. 2 to 6 players, which sounds right to me. You can easily, that's a very reasonable, it splits very well, let me put it that way. 1 to 100 hours playing time. I suspect that if you play the basic game, as we'll see, it's going to come in more like 50 hours. But there's like a whole bunch of additional stuff here as well, as we'll see in a moment. 60 to 300 miles hex scale. Corps and Army unit scale. And of course, there's different scales on the Europe map versus the Pacific map, and that's why there's 2 different numbers there. Complexity is high expert. That feels a little high to me. And solitaire suitability is low because there is some hidden information. There are cards, but it's not really a card-driven game in any conventional way. You don't have a hand. You have, well, I think some of the add-ons may actually give you a hand of cards, but in the last version of the game, you didn't have a hand. You had a selection of political and economic options that were on cards, and as long as you met the prerequisites, you could play whatever one of those things you wanted. So let's open her up and take a look. So this is not courtesy of Decision Games, by the way. This is courtesy of me. So Very nice looking box, like we said. And the newer boxes from Decision are the thicker boxes that we've become a little more accustomed to in recent years out of wargaming hobby games. And it's very tight. All right, so we have a lot of shrink-wrapped stuff. I'm glad I got the knife out. In the box. So let's push this to one side and start digging. So we get 2 shrink-wrapped packets of booklets. It says the core rules. The core rules, at least, are available on the Decision Games website in PDF format. As of last I checked, which it has been a couple of weeks, the remaining books were not available. I don't know if that's going to change or not. But there's like a lot of stuff here. So shrink wrap. All right, so very excited about a lot of this. Now, previously, the plan was to have Axis Empire's Total Krieg, which is the European theater, and Axis Empire's Dicenso, which was the Pacific theater, and then to do an expansion for both games, the Axis Empire's expansion. One of the reasons, I imagine, that this took longer than anticipated was that got kind of reimagined along the way into a complete new edition of the game. And the variable there may just have been that the other 2 versions sold out. That's possible. So let's open up all the books, actually. And I'm trying not to damage anything on the way in. I will definitely be getting this to a table. The local folks there's some fans of this system amongst the locals up here in Ohio. So this will hit a table no later than February, I am positive. This is a game that basically gets set up as a side game at Winterfest every year. But this year might actually be a main game. All right, so we got 5 booklets. These are matte finish paper. They're going to be full color. I have looked at the core rules book. The core rules book is 63 pages. Now, credits on this. Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition development, Thomas Prowl. Thomas Prowl was one of the 3 designers or co-designers of the previous editions. The other 2 were Alan Emmerich and Salvatore Vasta. Maps by Joe Youst. Now, they're not the same maps. I have looked at the graphics and ensured that the maps have, in fact, been redone. I like Joe Youst as a map artist a lot. And he has done a very nice looking job from what I have seen so far. We'll see what I think after I look at this. So we got a solid table of contents. The way the last edition was set up is you kind of had a core rule book with sort of core rules and then lookup rules that you would look up at need. And it looks like they have, in fact, incorporated some of that here. We do have a bunch of optional rules for separate piece, Fortunes of War. Now that's where you might have some hidden cards to play out of a hand. You have a luck mechanic. These are all optional rules. Miscellaneous optional rules as well. Now I am very curious to start exploring that as well. Illustrations in here, again, it is full color. Illustrations in here are, I wouldn't say lavishly illustrated, but it's fine. There are illustrations. We do have, looks like there's a decent number of examples and little sidebars and design notes and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. The land combat model is pretty detailed in this series, but not like extremely detailed, right? I mean, it's a ground combat model that's comparably detailed to, say, Third Reich or World in Flames or something like that. Naval and air, on the other hand, are much less much more abstract in the core game. But one of the things that was going to be in the expansion and is now in here is that you have what is called Schiffkrieg. That is a sort of an expansion in this edition that gives you actual named ship units and stuff like that. So we'll see all that stuff as we go here. So we got major countries and minor countries. There's a lot of minor countries. Dependents, which sounds like a lot of British Empire stuff. Regions. Country status. This looks well put together to me. And I can vouch for the game, the previous edition of the game at least. So we've got 54 pages of rules here. And then the rest is optional rules in the core book, but there's like going to be a ton of additional optional rules, starting with this, Dice of Decision. Now, this is a fat book too, actually, fatter than I thought. This is probably one of the things that I was looking forward to most. So what this is huge table of contents here. So this is a sort of starting game state randomizer system that allows you to do variant World War IIs. It's not a like a full game in itself, although I think to call it a mini game is probably reasonably fair. But this game does start in 1936, as I recall, anyway, if you play the main campaign. So you do have some of that build-up aspect that you might get out of, say, a Gathering Storm or a Days of Decision as well. And that was in the previous edition. But this lets you vary the situation prior to that, like the outcome of World War I, for example. So I am not going, and again, you know, full color, matte finish. I like the paper weight is nice. Module designer's notes. Now this one, Dice of Decision, Design and Development, Alan Emmerich and Thomas Prowl. Okay. So we've got a second book there, and that's, if I didn't say so, 56 pages. This is 64 pages as well. And that's like a complete optional system for doing what I just described. Here is the Schiffskrieg module rule. This feels like another 64-page book. It's a 56-page book. Now, this is the add-on air naval system with named ships. And there's a lot here. There's a significant amount of scenario notes that kind of pick up about halfway through the book. But you've got what looks like about 20 or so pages of new core mechanics if you want to play with this. This is optional. You don't have to play with it, but it's here if you want more ships stuff. And, you know, speaking strictly for myself, I felt like Dicenso, the Pacific module or games, they were both standalone games in the previous edition. I did feel like the Dicenso felt a little less satisfying to play because of the level of abstraction present in the air naval system before. So in addition to that core rule book, we have two exclusive rules booklets. One for Dicenso for the Pacific, one for Total Krieg. And there was a special notation in the previous edition about rules that apply to one game but not the other, or to both games put together. And I'm not sure how they're handling that in this particular volume. But this book is, again, 48 pages, I'm guessing. 56 pages, once again. A lot of this is scenarios, though. A big chunk of this is, in fact, scenarios. We have training scenarios that start on page 23. So, once again, standard caveat here that rules page count does not necessarily directly correlate to overall game complexity. However, if you are playing, say, Total or Krieg out of here, that'd be the European theater, then you absolutely are going to have something like 80 pages of rules to deal with. To me, that's not really a problem, and that probably gives a false impression of how complicated this is, but maybe I should take the back of the box's word for it and not my own experience. The core system is not particularly complicated. But we got like a whole bunch of additional stuff here dealing with things like the Urals and what happens in the Pacific Theater if you're not playing the Pacific Theater, that kind of stuff. But about 20 pages of this is additional rules for the European theater, and then we start with training scenarios. Now we have a case white, as was the case in the previous edition. We have a case white, a Barbarossa, and a Fall of France scenario, and those are the training scenarios. And they're actually really good, well-constructed training scenarios that will actually teach you the really critical things that you need to know. See my previous video on that topic. We have one map campaign games, one for the Eastern Theater of Europe, one for the Western Theater of Europe. We have a pile of two map campaign games, one of which starts in 1937, 38, 39, 40, 41, A and B, 42, 43, 44, and 45. Did the previous edition start in 37? That's possible. There's like a whole bunch of these, and I have them all, and it's easy to get them mixed up. A couple of them start in 36, a couple of them start in 35. This one may start in 37. And then there is extensive player's notes, about 10 pages of that at the back, and about 7 or 8 pages of that at the back end. So once again, full color, same paper stock. It's quite nice. Just in terms of physical quality. All right, so Dicenso, this actually feels a little thinner, if anything. 48 pages on here. And over here we have roughly, again, about 20 pages or so of Pacific-specific rules. And then some scenarios. Tora is the Pacific training scenario. And there are There's no one-map campaign game, which does kind of make sense here. There's a pile of 2-map campaign games, though. 37, 38, 39, 40, 41A, 41B, 42, 43, and 44. Presumably, you start in 45, and it's kind of just a matter of exactly how long it's going to take. And then we got player's notes at the back as well. Looks quite nice so far. Now, in addition to all that, we have a giant pack of player aids. We have a giant shrink-wrapped pack of counters. And this might be the first decision game I've seen with a box insert, which is probably getting recycled. We do have 3 6-sided dice. This uses 6-sided dice. We have map overlays for the variants that happen in Dice of Decision. So for example, what happens if Austria-Hungary survives World War I? That is a thing that I know is possible. Yeah, box inserts definitely, it's nice, but it's getting recycled. Oh, I got to take it out, actually, because the maps are underneath. So let's set up a map so that we can see the fine work of Mr. Youst here today. As I'm setting this up, I'll point out that, and I think this is probably the case on both of them, on the map, because I'm going to have to lay this out in a weird way. You've got this fairly large turn record track, a terrain effects chart, a terrain key, and then a variety of boxes for different things. And then down here we have strategic warfare, used assets, delay, DRMs on delay. The delay box is kind of it's a really critically important mechanic in this system. So here we have the new map, and it looks real nice. The fold is a little hard, but that's something I can kind of just, we'll let that rest out at some point. This is, if I haven't said this specifically, a 4-map game in total. So you're going to have an East and West Europe map and an East and West Pacific map. The highlighted hexes are objective hexes. So I think the green hexes are Allied controlled hexes, so they're objectives for the Germans, and the gray hexes are German or Axis controlled hexes, so they are objectives for the Allies, as I recall. So offhand, you got London, Paris, Madrid, and Lisbon are actually objectives. And then a whole pile in Germany, and then in Italy, it's pretty much just Rome. And on this side of North Africa, there's really no objectives at all. Although, there's objectives that are discrete objectives in a game, and objectives that they're not objectives in the sense of victory points, but they're locations that you want based on their geography. And Stockholm is actually an objective as well. So with that as a background, there's 3 more of these maps, and they're pretty nice. All right, so let's look at the player aids next. Once again, as usual, we're going to be trying to extract this stuff from the packaging without ruining anything, which looks like it's working so far. So got, knock on wood on that. All right, so there's approximately a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch stack of player aids here. So let's quickly buzz through them. Here is the Axis Empires component list. There's a whole lot of this. There's a lot of components here. We got the map large sheets and the counter sheets, and there's 20 overlays in this packet of overlays, which is nicely packaged. It's in a Ziploc baggie, but it's got a piece of cardboard on it so they don't get all mangled. On the bottom here, we have a symbol guide, which is nice. That's blank on the back. You probably won't need the symbol guide after playing for a fairly short amount of time, and you won't need this unless you're trying to decipher whether you got the whole game or not. Support unit and convoy marker aid card. Okay. This is a 2-sided, 8.5 by 11, reasonably heavy, I'd say medium weight cardstock. Medium weight for player aids anyway. You go to Michael's or your local craft store, and they might call it something different. It would be heavy for them. Axis deck building chart. Okay, so this looks like it is, so the state of the available deck can change depending on the situation in the game, and this card is what tells you how to do all that. And then there's one of those for the Soviets and the Western Allies. Now, this is a 3-position game. The Axis, the Western Allies, and the Soviets. And therefore, I think the best experience is with 3 or more players. But you can and should be able to fit at least 2 or maybe even 3 additional players there. I wouldn't split the Soviets. I would have the Soviets play the Soviet Union on both maps. But otherwise, I would say have Axis and allies in both Europe and Pacific for a total of 5 players. The Soviets of the Pacific don't have a ton to do unless there's a conflagration with the Japanese. Game creation table. So this is part of Shift Create. I bet there's some color coding going on here. This is Chapter 1, The Great War, and this is Chapter 2, Between the Wars. So these are the tables that run or Dice of Decision, I should say. This is pretty cool. Great War opening moves, Japanese entry, Italian entry, Turkish entry, Great War outcome, Russian Empire. This is pretty cool. You're gonna see some video on this, I'm positive. All right, Chapter 1, outcome checklists for Dice of Decision. So it looks like the green cards are the Dice of Decision cards, and there's Chapter 2, outcome checklists. I'm not even going to try and decipher that right now. And then final setup card for Dicenso and Totaler Krieg. Oh, that's cool. In addition to it being in the book, you've got setup cards as well. Area tables. Okay, so this is part of the political system in the game where you can play cards that do political things, and you might have to determine a target randomly or an event. Well, here's the overlay reference. This is actually quite cool. Okay, so, well, we're not even going to try and decipher that, but over here, this is probably Schiffskrieg stuff. Maybe not. Axis faction card. Okay, so we have the Axis have their own player aid card. The Soviets have their own player aid card. The Western Allies have their own player aid card. And based on the previous edition, again, some of this data might be different between the 3 factions. We have force pool displays. One of the things that the cards can do is make changes to the available force pool. And we have one of these for each faction as well. The Axis, which are in a red, which I'm not sure makes any sense, but whatever. The Soviets and the Western Allies. Here is the Strategic Hex Tracker. This is rather nice, actually. So you can keep track of who controls what on a off-map display instead of having to move counters around to figure it out off the map. That's not sure I've seen that before. That's a good idea. Assuming you get the space to put all this up. And if you have 2 folding tables and then like 1 folding table on the side, you've got enough room for this game. All right, European War display. I think this is what you're using to simulate the European War if you are only playing Dicenso. There should be an equivalent Pacific War mechanic as well. All right, so here's the Schiffskrieg. Okay, so here's Schiffskrieg charts and tables. So this is a parallel set of faction cards to use if you are playing with the Schiffskrieg expansion. That's interesting. Okay, and then additional displays. How's this different from the other one? This is European Axis, that's why. The red one is the Japanese. Here's the Soviets. Here's the Western Allies. Here's the Strategic Hex Tracker for Europe. Here's a scenario display. Fire in the East. This is the East Front scenario. And then the Great Crusade is back here. So that's cool. You've got a shorter turn track and smaller boxes and all that stuff. Because you're not necessarily, because they're one map scenarios, you might not necessarily have those maps out. So this card is the battle board for Schiffskrieg. This this is pretty cool. So there's you line the ships up in the middle here, move stuff around to different boxes depending on what happens to them. And then you've got your summary over here and your summary over here facing the other player. Also well thought out. Here is the Fleet HQ display. There's only one of these, though. That doesn't feel right. Here's the shipbuilding track. So there's going to be a lot of extra displays for this thing. There is only one Fleet HQ display on here, so you can have a total of 12 fleets everywhere. I don't think that's really a problem based on the scale. I kind of want to play a little more Dicenso to figure that out. All right, so let's take a look at the counters. And here we have the shrink-wrapped pack of counters. I do kind of appreciate that they shrink-wrapped these to prevent them from rattling around inside the box. That's something that Decision has actually been doing for quite a while. Although, because of the box spacer on here, that's not really a big problem. Now, Decision has also upped their game in terms of counter overall quality. The counters are nice and thick now. We don't have any more of the old days stuff where you've got, you know, counters that aren't square anymore, or different counters on the same sheet that are different sizes or anything like that. All right, so we have what looks like 8.5 counter sheets. Is that correct? There are 8 counter sheets here. So here is counter sheet 1. Here we have a large number of Soviet units. I think the black stripes, I think, mean that they're one-step units, as I recall, but that's not true. I am wrong about that. I forget what that means. But we have a bunch of Soviets and then a bunch of minors, including France, what looks like Burma, India, Indonesia, perhaps, a variety of states that may or may not exist in your World War II if you're playing with Dice of Decision. Okay, so this is the okay, I get it. This is the Dicenso counter sheet. So these are Pacific counters. Here's the Allied, and the red are the Japanese. If I said they're Soviets, I'm an idiot. They're obviously Japanese. Then they're a little less red than in the previous edition, as I recall. So here's the Allies in the Pacific. We've got a much smaller number of Soviets. Here's your Americans. Here's your British. Now, bear in mind the very abstract system for ships in the base game. So here we have counter sheet 3. This is Total Krieg, and here we have our Germans and our French. And these are on a brown. This is the stock that Decision's been using lately. It's a brown core stock. It's fairly heavy. It's pretty close to the limit of what my counter clipper will accommodate, actually. We have a large number of Soviets here, a whole half a counter sheet of Soviets. The counter density in this thing is, again, core game, is relatively low. So we have Soviets here. We got, once again, British and Americans. I like the colors. Here is Axis Empire's Total Krieg counter sheet number 5. And this is more Soviets. So we've got Schiffskrieg Soviets. Yeah, there's going to be a total of 12 fleets on the map because the counters for that flip over to represent Allied or Axis. So we've got some markers. There's not that many markers in this system either. And then we've got a whole bunch of different minors. More Schiffskrieg ships. And here's where we're getting into the individual named ships for Italy and France and Britain, of which there's a lot, and I would expect that. There's a lot of Japanese, as you would expect. There's a decent number of Germans. There's additional air stuff here as well. Americans, there's plenty of them. Who are these guys? So now we're getting in over here into the Dice of Decision stuff with some variant Americans. We have, looks like Swedes, Ukrainians, Turks. So a whole bunch of interesting things going on here. Here's another Dice of Decision sheet with variant Japanese, British, French, Russian, Soviet. Sure who these purple guys are. Hopa, that's one of the Chinese factions. Inner Mongolia, the Baltic states. The yellow are Italians. And then we got a half counter sheet over here. There's your Austro-Hungarian Empire right there. And I guess you probably just, if Imperial Russia manages to survive, you just use the same counters as you would for the Soviet Union. You got Northern Ireland here, so we're gonna have to figure all this out. There's a lot of game here, folks. It is not cheap. I think the pre-order price on this was $240. That's really high. That's very expensive. But you are getting a lot of stuff. So card decks, there's a lot. Soviets. Now each faction has their own card deck. So we've got Soviets, Western Allies, Axis, Soviets. Okay, so you'll have Dicenso. Let's see here, Dicenso. There's your 3 Dicenso decks. The Soviet deck is the smallest by quite a bit. And here is your European theater, Total Krieg, thick Axis. They're all thick, actually. And then here we have the Fortunes of War cards. So I do want to show you kind of what the cards are like. So if you'll forgive me while I fumble with the removal of the shrink wrap here, we're going to take a look, especially at these Fortunes of War cards. Now, this is a completely new thing to this edition. All right. So what I'm seeing here is a variety of cards that do different things, including things like surprise attacks, mass surrenders, inspired leadership, disastrous drop, ooh, after an enemy airdrop, nice. Special weapons espionage, stunning air raid, submarine warfare, strategic redeployment. Very interesting. Okay, so this isn't like totally alien to the types of cards you'll find in the regular decks. I don't want to kind of take every deck apart, but we're definitely going to take the Axis deck apart, and I'll show you some of those. It's really clear here that, you know, you can really see the graphical design upgrade in this edition of the game on these cards. I have no real qualms about the price because I know I'll play this. So, all right. The cards do have numbers. So we might have, for instance, this would be the German cards, and this is German card 1, German card 2, so on and so forth. And this isn't strictly true, but generally the lower numbered cards are the ones that get played earlier in the war. So there's some code on here. Goering works established. So what this does is it's played in, it looks like either the option card segment or the conditional events segment, and it does one of these two things. And some of these will get removed from the game once you play them. This potentially adds a large number of German armor, smallish armor units to the force pool. A lot of those will do that. German, you may do both of these events, actually. I suspect that you do. So beyond that, you're going to have requirements, right? These are the prerequisites to play this card. So to play German rearmament, you have to play Goering Works Established. The rearmament, this is the rearmament card. You can only play one of these per year. Continuing rearmament, Nazi-Soviet Pact, Pact of Steel. You are absolutely, it's been a while, absolutely going to do all the things that are described on the card. You do this in the option card segment and this in the political events segment. And there's a cute little quote at the bottom, and it tells you when it's removed from the game. And it's got, in addition to like an Axis card number, it's got a Axis Empires card number as well. So I think 6A and 6B are another example. So if you play 6A, you're going to remove 6B. So you can, this is again Germans, you can either do additional mobilization or build the West Wall. And this is removed in autumn 1939. And maybe if you start your game in 37, you got some weird things going on early, coming out of World War I, that might make sense. There's also sort of three phases. There's like an early, middle, and a late war. I forget the actual terminology, and those are the color codes at the top, right? So in that early phase, you're going to have this, or I shouldn't say war, because the war shouldn't break out for 2 years after you start playing the game. If you start in 1937, you get these blue, the black, and then red for the state of total war at the end. And there's quite a few at the end as well. And so these are some of the variant cards that can come in with Dice of Decision. All right, so as is typical for a big thing like this, we're going to put this back together off camera. But Axis Empires Ultimate Edition is here. I am pretty impressed with what I see from a physical component standpoint, and I have had my eye on the game for quite a while, so I am happy to finally receive it, and I am happy to have had you have been able to watch the unboxing of it, so we will hopefully all be happy. So I want to thank you for watching. I'd like to give a shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose support and encouragement it would be impossible to continue doing the stuff that we do here on the channel. So thank you, patrons. Thank you for watching once again, and until next time, happy wargaming.